The hunt is on for a serial killer who's targeting ruthless criminals. Detective Joona Linna discovers that he's connected to some of the victims, and the manhunt becomes personal. So begins the book Lazarus, the seventh in a series of Nordic noir crime thrillers by author Lars Kepler. Lars Kepler is the pseudonym of Alexander and Alexandra Ahndoril, a husband and wife writing team based in Stockholm, Sweden. This fast-paced novel sends readers on a roller coaster of suspense and intrigue. And just as the biblical Lazarus rose from the dead, villains don't always remain buried. Lars Kepler, it's great to have you here with us today to talk about your latest book, Lazarus. How did you decide to become a writing team? Because I've read that you were very successful writers on your own. How did this come about?
Well, we're married and we love each other and we have 3 daughters and we love to do things together. And actually, writing is a great thing. It's a wonderful occupation, but it's pretty lonely. But well, it wasn't that easy, actually.
No, so we started actually to write a children's book together, but it was a total failure because we kept fighting about everything. And then...
Yeah, because you have your style, you have your own metaphors and so forth. And I know I was a bit...
sour?
Yeah, I protected my style.
Actually, the key for us to be able to write together was to create this pen name, Lars Kepler. So with this third author, we could leave our egos behind. And actually, we haven't been fighting at all since that, almost not, maybe a little bit.
It's good for marriage.
How did the name Lars Kepler come to you?
When we came up with the idea that we had to have a third author, and then I said his name is Kepler, because it's from, I have been reading a lot about Johannes Kepler, the German scientist. Well, he found out the ways that planets move around the sun. So
yeah, and the name Kepler had this atmosphere. We liked the tone of it. And then I came up with Lars because, yeah, it was kind of a tribute to Stieg Larsson, who, he did his fantastic thing in the Swedish crime fiction tradition and died so tragical. So we wanted to, give him a homage.
Yeah.
Well, I read that you came out with your first book, which was a huge success, as all of them have been. And suddenly it became a little difficult to hide your identity. Can you tell us about that time?
Because we really wanted to stay secret behind this pen name. It was, a part of the idea of the common creative process. So we thought it was necessary to be secret. So we didn't tell anybody, not even our children, not even our publishing house knew about our true identity. But after the immediate success with the hypnotist, it became like a media manhunt in Sweden. One newspaper said it must be Henning Mankell. And he said...
Yeah, he was very angry.
Because why would I write under a pseudonym?
He was so insulted.
And then the hunt started. Almost every writer was pointed out as Lars Kepler.
Yeah, everybody except for us. But then in the summer, in the end of the summer, and the book had been out maybe a couple of months only, some journalists, they found us we were staying at a small cottage in the Swedish west coast, and it was dark and we were going to bed. And we saw this flashlight coming closer and closer to the house. And it was really, who is that walking in our garden? And I was hiding, and Alexandra had to open when they knocked on the door. And that was a journalist and a photographer, and they had our book and they said, admit it, you are Lars Kepler. So we admitted it.
That is a great story. And I think it would have been pretty impossible with how hugely successful this series of books have been to be anonymous with it. How has this character, Joona Linna, fascinated you for such a long time and continues to? What is it about the character?
We feel that with each book, we come a bit closer to him, but he's still a mystery in a way. He's a very skillful chief inspector, but he's also empathic. He's not a James Bond because everything that happens to him costs him something.
Yeah, so he's more like a Sherlock Holmes with empathy. So an ordinary man, not an aristocrat as Sherlock.
But it's also very nice to write a series because then we never have to say goodbye to our characters. We can always meet them. We know that they live in a kind of parallel universe where we can meet them again. And with Joona Linna, in Lazarus, he is kind of the main character, and Saga Bauer as well. They are the main characters for the series, but in Lazarus, it's their story, totally.
And Saga is also an investigator, more like a sister to him. This isn't a secondary romance story or anything.
No, they are like siblings in a way. They're very good friends.
Equals, yeah. It must be satisfying to write a really smart character like Joona. That's one thing I think. Maybe is that one of the things that keeps you going with it?
Yeah, he's smart and he is also very stubborn and brave. He does everything that I would never do in my life.
But it's great to write about a person who's like a lot smarter than you are yourself. We can use months to think of something he can just find out in a second.
Yeah.
So
I noticed on your website you have bios of all of the main characters who come up again and again. Was that something really helpful to you when you created those, to make sure you had your characters really like fully formed like they are?
no, not actually, because we really know them. They are part of our family, so we meet them every day. So we know their story in the past, but not the future. That's why we write in the present tense also, because we travel together with them into the future.
How do you write together, process-wise? How does that work? Who does what?
Well, we try to do everything equally. I think it's important that we write the same book. So we go through the plot over and over again. We write down notes on every character's line and everything that will, the twists and the turns.
And it's good to be two writers when you make a really complicated plot. We write down on small cards or notes, or which we spread over a floor or nail to our wall, and we use months of just dreaming up the story together, so we're absolutely sure we have the same story to write.
And then we do research together equally as well. That is also important for us, that one of us isn't the expert. It's good that we both know the physical part of everything. Being in a maximum security prison or whatever can happen, and then when we feel that we have everything about the story, then we start to write. And then we go to our desk. We have two computers
in this room, actually.
Yeah, in this room. So we sit side by side, and maybe I start with one scene and Alexandra with another, and after a while we change text with each other. And then we keep on writing in each other's texts and changing things, filling in gaps. And I think in the end, we don't know who wrote what. I don't think there's one sentence that just one of us wrote. So it's kind of getting the tone of Lars Kepler.
So you get the tone together. It's truly collaborative.
Yes, absolutely.
It's great.
I also read that you really do some in-depth research. Can you give us a few examples of that?
Well, we always try out every handgun in the book, because it's, you can read about it, you can watch something on YouTube or so forth. But if you really try the guns, the difference in recoil and the physical part of it. And so we do that, and we go to, if it's a prison, we go to the prison, and we ask if we can enter the prison, and we spend some time there, because again, you always find things you would never be able to find if you read about it. So, like the feeling in the corridors underground,
the way they walk in the prison, because they have no appointment, they have nowhere where to go, so they walk in a certain way where they stop all the time, because they wait for doors to be opened, and a certain rhythm that you couldn't Google about. So I think research is always good, and going to places, smelling the grass or the woods. In Lazarus, we have been a lot in the Netherlands and in Norway, and we just thought that it would be really nice to have some settings there. So the Netherlands is totally flat, and that is where people in Lazarus tried to hide, and that was kind of interesting for us. How do you hide in a totally flat landscape? And we also have a lot of experts that we talk to.
In the police force, of course, and doctors and psychiatrists.
And it's very inspiring.
So that was kind of a team.
Yeah, it's a part of writing all that research. We love it.
So when you finished your first book, Hypnotist, did you set out to write a whole series like this? Did you know there was more story to tell at that point? Actually,
when we were writing it, it was such a lot of fun. We really loved this writing. Yeah. So we said, let's write a series. And we said, we're going to write 8 books. We told the publishing house when we sent in the manuscript. And like 8 books, for us, it sounded like 1 million books. So we never...
And now we have written 8 books and are on the 9th book. So, but we sent in the manuscript anonymously with, the Hotmail address. With this letter, we said, this is going to be a series. So absolutely.
Yeah. They're hugely successful both here and in Europe. I have the statistic, 15 million books in 40 languages. So it's really a worldwide phenomenon. I really enjoyed the book. It's a great book to read on these short days, now in winter, kind of curl up by the fire. It's very much a page turner. So how did you get that suspense in there?
Well, I think Ulrich Walter is a very complex villain in a way, and he really scares us. So we did a lot of research on serial killers, and we kind of interlaced that research with our own deepest fears.
And when they think that Ulrich Walter might be alive, Joona and Saga make 2 totally different choices in their lives. They go in different directions, and they will face the consequences of their choices through the story. And it's a good engine, and it's interesting, I think, at least for us, to follow them.
With Lazarus, it was time for Joona and Saga to meet this villain again. But where he came from, I think he must have come from hell or something.
but for us, it's like we try to meet our own fears, because writing must cost something, and Ulrich really scares us. Our books is like a journey from chaos to order, from injustice to justice, from so it's like an optimistic journey anyway. It's kind of a taking care of our own fears. So we create the most horrible serial killer, and then we must stop him through Joona and Saga, of course.
Yeah, and that is kind of satisfying. So I know that our stories, they are dark, but we feel that they, without spoiling, they end at the right place, in a way.
Not totally idyllic, of course, but
you get the answers
Yeah.
of the questions. That I think that is very important for us.
And satisfying to have the answers. In opposite, like in real life, you never ever get an answers. You read about horrible homicides and serial killers, and you never ever get an answers. Why?
What happened?
Why these victims? What happened? Why?
Yeah, because it's really not interesting for us to just paint a picture of a monster, a totally evil person. We want to understand, like what Alexandra is talking about. How did this happen? Why was killing the logical answer for this person?
Yeah, because he wasn't born a monster.
Something happened.
Something happened, and he made this choice to start killing, and that's interesting because writing is all about empathy. You feel empathy with your main characters, of course, but also with the victims and even with the villains.
Yeah.
I could feel that empathy on the page, that this is not, it would be very easy with this type of book to maybe fall into something really one-dimensional, but it's not at all. It's complex, these relationships between the characters.
Thank you. That is very important for us. And also maybe to say that the books, all our books are part of a series, but they contain a solved mystery in a way, so they can all be read as a standalone.
Yeah, you mentioned that also on your website and just alluded to it. It was a really good quote. The stories begin in chaos and end in order, start with riddles and end with answers. That probably helps with the fears.
Yes, absolutely.
That helps us anyway.
Can you talk a little bit about, both of you, about your careers before you started the series? You both were writers and wrote plays and other things.
Well, Alexandra was kind of a wonder boy.
But when I started really early, I wrote my first novel when I was 18 on a typewriter, and I didn't have the economy to make any photocopies, so I posted my original to the biggest publishing house in Sweden, and it was accepted. And since then, I just been writing. So I've been writing from start, like postmodern novels, and then more and more storytelling, and then I started to write for the theater too, and I even wrote a libretto for the Gothenburg Opera House.
Alexandra, you are also hugely successful in your career. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I was working. I wanted to be an actress when I grew up, and I was accepted to this very prestigious school, the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art in Stockholm. So I come from a small village in south of Sweden, and then I moved up to Stockholm to start this fantastic education. And then I met Alexander immediately at a party, and he started to tell me that it's much better to be a writer than to be an actress, because when you write, you control the whole process. You control everything. You are director and actor and everything at the same time.
Sorry.
Yeah, so he made me change path, and I'm very happy. Actually, acting and writing are very similar in a way, because you have to understand the characters fully. You work through the text to give them blood, life, soul in a way.
Yeah, that's interesting, because it's the same as we were talking about before, to feel empathy for every character when you write. When you're an actress, you don't choose your own role, so you have to you have to
try to understand what kind of role it is, even whoever it is in a way. So then you persuaded me to write, and then I wrote 3 historical novels, totally different from Alexandra. And then we just started this cooperation. So and it's really enjoyable to write together. Yeah. I think it's the best choice we have ever made, maybe. Yeah. And it's good for our relationship, because when you have these conversations as we have all the time, it kind of deepens our relationship as well.
Are you writing something else right now?
Yeah.
The 8th book is just out here in Europe, actually. The Mirror Man.
It's interesting because when you end the book, especially when we ended Lazarus, it was totally intensive. The last weeks of writing, it was like crazy. We stopped to do the dishes and
Yeah,
the
it's like
laundry.
running a marathon, and you
Yes.
feel that I'm almost there.
So we gave it all. It's like now we're totally empty. We will never ever be able to write another creative sentence in our lives. So we started to clean our apartment and do the dishes and the laundry.
Everything that we had neglected.
And like, it was just a few days of cleaning, and then we had a new idea. And it was the idea for this new book, The Mirror Man. It's connected to our first book, The Hypnotist, because our hypnotist, Eric Maria Bach, from the first book, returns in this book. So it's like a really psychological nightmare.
Because you're so successful, you must have deadlines from the publisher. Do you?
No, we are free.
we can't handle deadlines because we just want to write a book we would love to read ourselves. So if it takes 2 years or 3 years, it doesn't matter. It must be the way we want it to be. So they have to accept it, our publishing house here.
But they will, when we feel that, okay, we are going to make it maybe before summer or something, then they will know, of course, so they can start to plan.
So it's sort of an organic process where you have your characters, but the plot has to kind of come out of that in a way.
Yes, yes.
It has to be,
You
I
have
think
to-
you have to
because-
have all the layers,
Yeah,
I think,
and really
text.
listen to your story, because it's you can plan and make this most wonderful plot, but when you start to write, everything comes alive and it's magic. You know that yourself, of course, when the characters start to live and they do what they want to, and they don't care about your plot and your notes, and that's a fantastic thing.
I've heard other writers say that you have to kind of let things just kind of simmer sometimes. You have to go back to cleaning the apartment or taking a hike or whatever to kind of see where you're going to go next. Do you find that to be true?
Yeah, a book has its timeline in a way. You can't hurry it, because for us it's important to know the story before we start to write. But then, as Alexandra said, when we start to write, things happen that we couldn't plan, that we wouldn't understand, that we wouldn't know.
When you write yourself, you have to stop sometimes and take a step back and watch it from another angle, or take a break and then return to the masterpiece, and you will see that it might not be as good as you thought when you wrote it.
Yeah, I've heard it described as sort of like you're going through the forest. You don't quite know where you're going, and you just have to keep going, and you'll find your way, but it's just kind of, you're in this thicket for a while when you're writing especially a long novel like yours.
Yeah, they have this format. I don't know why they always end up, approximately the same pages. I think we need all these pages to tell our story the way we want to tell it.
It's not at all overly long. It's a very, very much a page turner and really fun to read. How has it been different for you trying to write during this pandemic?
Well, writing has been normal because we have just been at home with our computers, as we always are.
A bit more time.
Yeah, but no traveling. Usually we travel so much doing promotions, and now we do this. I really miss meeting our readers.
Yeah,
that is the best thing ever.
Do you tour the US with your books?
Yes, we have, and we were supposed to.
Yeah, so hopefully we'll get to meet you sometime.
That would be so nice.
That would be great to hear you in person, read from your book and talk. Lars Kepler, thank you so much for being with us today to talk about Lazarus and all the other books in your series with Joona Linna. It's been a lot of fun to meet you and talk to you.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you so much.
Great to see you.
Great to see you too, yeah.